Imagine waking up from a brutal head injury, your world spinning, only to discover your millionaire husband's darkest secrets staring back at you from his unlocked iPad. Affair text with your best friend. That's just the beginning. What if those messages revealed a chilling plan to steal your unborn child, destroy your life, and worse, cover up murders from his past? This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a heart-pounding tale of survival, federal takedowns, and a woman's unbreakable rise from the ashes. Stick around, you won't believe how she turns the tables and fights back against a monster in a mansion. If this hooked you, hit that like button, drop a comment with your biggest plot twist prediction, share with a friend who loves true crime drama, and subscribe for more stories that keep you on the edge. Let's dive in. Sarah Davidson stood in her pristine marble kitchen, one hand supporting her 7-month pregnant belly, while the other gripped the granite countertop for stability. The morning sickness had been particularly brutal that Tuesday, and she was grateful for the cool ocean breeze drifting through their Malibu mansion's floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything in their home screamed perfection, from the custom Italian cabinets to the imported French fixtures. Their luxury lifestyle was the envy of everyone in their social circle. Sarah had spent years curating this Pinterest-perfect existence, transforming from a successful marketing executive into the ideal millionaire's wife. But that morning, something felt different. Marcus had stumbled home at 3 a.m., reeking of alcohol and muttering about another failed business dinner. These late nights had become increasingly common over the past few months, coinciding perfectly with Sarah's pregnancy hormones and growing insecurities about her changing body. Maybe it's just the stress of the acquisition, Sarah whispered to herself, a mantra she'd been repeating for weeks. Marcus's tech company was in the middle of a major deal, and she understood that successful millionaire husbands sometimes needed space to handle high-pressure situations. The sound of glass shattering upstairs made Sarah freeze. She'd heard Marcus moving around in his home office for the past hour, and the crashes were becoming more frequent. Something was wrong. Sarah climbed the curved staircase carefully, her pregnancy making her movements slower and more deliberate. The office door was slightly open, and she could see Marcus stumbling around, papers scattered across his usually immaculate desk. His behavior had been increasingly erratic lately. The charming, controlled businessman she'd married 5 years ago seemed to be unraveling, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow to blame. "Honey, are you okay up here?" Sarah called softly, not wanting to startle him in his current state. Marcus spun around, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. In his hand was his iPhone, the screen cracked from being dropped. For a moment, Sarah saw something in his expression that made her blood run cold. Pure, undiluted rage. "I told you not to come up here, Sarah," he slurred, his words thick with alcohol and something darker. "Can't you just stay downstairs and mind your own business for once?" Sarah had never heard Marcus speak to her with such venom, even during their worst arguments about his increasingly long hours and missed dinners. He'd never raised his voice or shown this level of hostility. "I'm sorry, I just heard the noise and wanted to make sure you were safe," Sarah said, instinctively stepping backward toward the door. "Maybe you should get some rest, and we can talk later when you're feeling better." "Don't tell me what I should do." Marcus's voice exploded through the room, echoing off the walls with a violence that made Sarah's unborn daughter kick frantically inside her belly. The transformation was terrifying. This wasn't the man who'd brought her peonies just yesterday morning, who'd rubbed her feet when they swelled, who'd talked lovingly about their daughter's nursery. This was a stranger wearing her husband's face. "Marcus, please, you're frightening me," Sarah whispered, her hand instinctively moving to protect her bump. "What's wrong? What happened at your meeting tonight?" "You want to know what's wrong?" Marcus took a step toward her, swaying slightly but maintaining that terrifying intensity in his eyes. "What's wrong is having a wife who doesn't understand that some things are none of her concern." What happened next would replay in Sarah's mind for months afterward. Marcus's hand flew out, not in a calculated strike, but in a drunken, violent gesture born of rage and alcohol. His knuckles connected with Sarah's temple with a sickening crack that seemed to echo through the room. Pain exploded through Sarah's skull as she stumbled backward, her vision blurring and her legs giving out beneath her. The last thing she remembered was the taste of blood in her mouth and the cold hardwood floor rushing up to meet her pregnant body. When Sarah regained consciousness, afternoon sunlight was streaming through their bedroom windows. Her head felt like it had been split open with an axe, and every small movement sent waves of nausea crashing through her body. But her first concern wasn't her own pain, it was her baby. Sarah's hands immediately went to her belly, and relief flooded through her as she felt the familiar flutter of movement. Her daughter was alive and apparently unharmed. Despite the trauma her mother had endured, Marcus was nowhere to be seen, but someone had clearly attended to Sarah while she was unconscious. She was wearing her nightgown instead of the maternity dress she'd had on that morning, and there was a glass of water and some pain medication on her nightstand. Next to the water was Marcus's iPad, its screen still glowing with what appeared to be text messages. Sarah's concussion made it difficult to focus, but certain words seemed to jump off the screen with startling clarity. "Can't wait to be free of her and that baby. Soon, my love. Once the divorce is final, we can be together properly. She has no idea what's coming. Poor naive Sarah." Sarah's blood turned to ice despite the warm California sunshine streaming through their windows. The messages were between Marcus and someone identified only as Jay and his contacts, and the timestamps showed they'd been exchanged while Sarah lay unconscious, fighting through the dizziness and nausea. Sarah scrolled up through weeks of messages that painted a picture so devastating she wondered if her concussion was causing hallucinations. "Jessica is coming to the baby shower next week. Can you believe she's helping plan it while we're together? Sarah trusts her completely. Your wife is so pathetically naive. It's almost sad how much she believes our act. My lawyer says the pregnancy actually works in our favor for custody arrangements. Pregnant women are considered emotionally unstable by default." Jessica, her best friend since college, the woman who'd been her maid of honor, the person Sarah had chosen to be their daughter's godmother. Sarah's hands shook as she continued reading, each message revealing a betrayal so deep and calculated that her pregnancy-compromised mind struggled to process the full scope of what she was discovering. The affair text revealed a timeline that made Sarah physically ill. Marcus and Jessica had been planning this destruction for over a year, timing their moves to coincide with Sarah's pregnancy when she would be most vulnerable and dependent. "She told you about our conversation regarding her career insecurities, perfect. We can use that against her in court to show she's mentally unstable. Jessica suggested Sarah might develop postpartum depression. We should start documenting any emotional episodes now. The timing is perfect. Once Sarah has the baby, we can file for custody of both children." Both children. Sarah's vision blurred as she reread that particular message. Jessica was pregnant too, and Marcus was the father. Every private moment, every vulnerable confession Sarah had shared with her husband and best friend had been ammunition in their war against her. They'd used her trust, her love, and even her pregnancy against her in ways she was only beginning to understand. Sarah realized with growing horror that her fall that morning hadn't been the beginning of Marcus's violence. It had been the moment when his mask finally slipped completely. The systematic manipulation, the isolation from her career and independence, the financial control that had gradually stripped away her autonomy. It had all been leading to this moment. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, showing Jessica's name on the caller ID. Through her blurred vision, Sarah could see the preview of a text message that made her stomach turn. "Hey girl, hope you're feeling better after your little accident this morning. Marcus called and told me you took a fall. Want to grab lunch tomorrow and talk about your baby shower plans? I have some amazing ideas that I think you'll love." The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. Jessica knew exactly what had happened. She probably knew Marcus had hit Sarah, and she was calling to continue the charade of friendship while planning to steal Sarah's husband, her baby, and her entire life. Sarah set the phone aside without responding, her mind racing despite the pounding in her head. She could hear Marcus's voice downstairs, talking to someone on the phone in the smooth, controlled tone he used for business calls. "Yes, Dr. Williams. She's awake now. The fall really shook her up. I think she's been so emotional lately, very anxious about the pregnancy. I'm genuinely concerned about her mental state going into the third trimester. Each word was a carefully calculated lie, building a narrative that would serve Marcus's purposes when the time came to destroy her completely. He was already laying the groundwork for painting her as an unstable pregnant woman who couldn't be trusted with their child. Sarah looked around their bedroom with new eyes. The designer furniture, the walk-in closet full of clothes she'd never had to budget for, the ocean view that had once made her feel so fortunate. It all felt like a beautiful prison now. Her hand moved to her belly, where her daughter continued to move and kick as if sensing her mother's distress. Sarah whispered a promise that would sustain her through the nightmare to come. I won't let them take you, sweet girl. Whatever it costs, whatever I have to do, I'll protect you from them. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made Sarah quickly close the iPad and pretend to be sleeping. Marcus entered the room carrying a tray with soup and crackers, his earlier rage replaced by his usual mask of concern. How are you feeling, sweetheart? He asked, setting the tray on her nightstand with practiced care. You had me so worried when you fell this morning. Sarah kept her eyes closed, afraid that if she looked at him, he'd see the knowledge burning in her gaze. She needed time to think, to plan, to figure out how to escape this trap that had been years in the making. The doctor said concussions can cause confusion and mood swings, Marcus continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. We need to be very careful about your emotional state right now, especially with the baby coming soon. Sarah could hear the threat hidden in his caring words. Any reaction she had to discovering his betrayal would be dismissed as pregnancy hormones or concussion-related instability. Marcus had positioned himself perfectly to gaslight her, no matter how she responded to learning the truth. I've called your sister Amanda, Marcus said, surprising Sarah. He usually discouraged her family visits, claiming they stressed her out unnecessarily. She's driving down from San Francisco tomorrow to help take care of you while you recover? Why would Marcus want Amanda here, unless he was planning to use even her sister's concern as evidence of Sarah's inability to care for herself? I also thought it might be good for you to have some extra sessions with Dr. Martinez, Marcus continued. This incident has me worried about your stability during these final months of pregnancy. There it was. Marcus was building a comprehensive case for her mental incompetence, using her own therapy sessions, family relationships, and medical care against her. Every person Sarah trusted was being turned into a witness for her unfitness as a mother. When Marcus finally left the room, Sarah allowed herself to cry. Silent tears for the marriage she'd thought was real, for the friend she'd lost, for the secure future she'd believed she was building for her daughter. But as the tears fell, something else grew inside Sarah alongside the grief. Anger, pure white-hot rage at being treated like a disposable asset in someone else's business plan. She might have been naive enough to trust a charming millionaire and his accomplice, but she wasn't stupid, and she wasn't going to let them destroy her without the fight of her life. Sarah waited until she heard Marcus leave the house before reaching for his iPad again. This time, she wasn't just reading. She was taking screenshots, documenting everything, building her own case. If Marcus and Jessica wanted to play games with her life, they were about to learn that the pregnant wife they'd underestimated had some moves of her own. Her phone buzzed with another message from Jessica. Sarah, I just heard about your fall from Marcus. I'm coming over right now with soup and those pregnancy magazines you love. Sarah stared at the message, knowing that Jessica was coming to gather intelligence, to assess how much Sarah suspected, to continue the performance of concerned friendship while plotting her complete destruction. For the first time since discovering the affair text, Sarah smiled. Let Jessica come. Let her play the devoted best friend one more time. Because now Sarah knew exactly who she was dealing with, and knowledge was the first step toward power. The millionaire marriage secrets were finally out in the open, at least to Sarah, and that changed everything about the game Marcus and Jessica thought they were playing. The next morning brought the sound of Jessica's designer heels clicking across the marble foyer, followed by her familiar laugh echoing through the mansion. Sarah had spent the night reading through months of affair texts, each message more damaging than the last. The best friend mistress luxury affair scandals were far worse than simple infidelity. This was a calculated campaign to destroy her life. "Sarah, where's my favorite mama to be?" Jessica's voice carried up the stairs with its usual fake enthusiasm. Sarah forced herself out of bed, choosing her outfit carefully. She selected a navy maternity dress that made her look put together, but not threatening. The kind of outfit that would help her maintain her facade while gathering information. Downstairs, Jessica was arranging fresh flowers in the kitchen island vase, completely at home in Sarah's space. She looked stunning as always, her success as a real estate agent having afforded her the kind of designer wardrobe that screamed ambition and wealth. "Oh, honey, you look so pale," Jessica said, rushing over with perfectly performed concern. "That fall really shook you up, didn't it?" Marcus was beside himself with worry when he called me. Sarah studied her former best friend's face, searching for any crack in the performance. Jessica's makeup was flawless, her hair styled in loose waves that looked effortless, but probably took an hour to achieve. Everything about her appearance was calculated to project success and desirability. "Yes, it was pretty scary," Sarah replied carefully. "I'm having trouble remembering some things clearly." "That's totally normal with concussions," Jessica said, moving around the kitchen with practiced ease. "My cousin had one last year, and she was confused for weeks. Marcus is being so smart to have you rest and recover properly." The casual way Jessica lied was breathtaking. Sarah had read their text messages from the previous night, where Marcus had updated Jessica on Sarah's condition, and they'd strategized about her visit. "He really is the perfect husband," Sarah said, watching Jessica's reaction carefully. "I feel so lucky to have found a man who's completely faithful and devoted." Jessica's hand paused for just a moment while pouring tea, but her smile never wavered. "You really are blessed. Marcus absolutely adores you and that baby." "Speaking of Marcus, he's been working such incredibly long hours lately," Sarah continued, testing the waters. "All those business dinners and weekend meetings. The tech industry must be so demanding right now." "Oh yes," Jessica agreed quickly. "The real estate market has been absolutely insane too. I've been showing properties at all hours, working with demanding clients who expect availability 24/7. Sarah nodded sympathetically, remembering the timestamps on the affair texts. While Jessica claimed to be showing properties to clients, she'd been in luxury hotels with Marcus, planning Sarah's destruction over champagne and room service. "That reminds me," Jessica continued, settling into the breakfast nook with practiced familiarity. "I had an amazing idea for your baby shower. What if we did it at the Four Seasons? I know the event coordinator there personally, and she owes me a huge favor from a recent deal." Sarah's stomach turned. The Four Seasons was where Marcus and Jessica had spent 3 nights together just last week, according to the credit card statements Sarah had discovered hidden in Marcus's desk drawer. "That's incredibly thoughtful of you to handle all the planning," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady. "You've been such an amazing friend throughout this entire pregnancy." "Of course that's what best friends are for." Jessica's eyes gleamed with something that looked suspiciously like satisfaction. "I want everything to be absolutely perfect for you and the baby." "The baby?" Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her bump, remembering the text where Marcus had joked about Jessica becoming a stepmother soon. They weren't just planning to steal Sarah's husband and money. They were planning to raise her daughter as their own. "Jessica, can I ask you something personal?" Sarah said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Anything you know, you can tell me everything. Have you ever been in love with a married man?" Jessica's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flash of panic that crossed her face. "What kind of question is that? Why would you ask me something like that?" "I've been thinking about loyalty and friendship since the concussion," Sarah explained, keeping her tone casual and slightly confused. "Maybe it's the head injury, but I keep wondering about what people are truly capable of when they want something badly enough." "Sarah, you're starting to worry me a little," Jessica said, her voice taking on a note of professional concern. "Are you sure you're feeling okay? Maybe I should call Dr. Martinez." "I'm fine, actually. I'm clearer than I've been in months, Sarah replied, watching Jessica's face carefully. The fall seems to have helped me see things that were right in front of me all along. Jessica stood abruptly, reaching for her designer handbag. Maybe I should call Marcus. You're talking a bit strangely, and I'm concerned about your mental state. Sit down, Jessica. Something in Sarah's tone made Jessica freeze completely. For the first time since she'd arrived, her mask of concern slipped entirely, revealing the calculating predator underneath. I know, Sarah said simply. Know what? Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. I know about you and Marcus. I know about the affair, the planning, the fake concern for my mental health. I know about your pregnancy. Jessica's face went completely white. Sarah, I don't know what you think you know, but your pregnancy, Jessica, the one Marcus is so excited about in your text messages, the boy you're carrying who's due in February. Jessica sat down heavily, her perfectly composed facade cracking like expensive porcelain. How did you find out? Marcus left his iPad open after he gave me this lovely concussion. Turns out head injuries make people very thorough readers. The two women stared at each other across the Marble Island, where they'd planned countless girls' nights and shared so many secrets over the years. All of it had been a lie, a performance designed to keep Sarah docile while they systematically destroyed her life. How long? Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the pain crushing her chest. Jessica's shoulders sagged in defeat. 18 months. Before my pregnancy? Yes. So when you comforted me through my miscarriage scare in the first trimester, you were already carrying Marcus's child. Jessica couldn't meet her eyes. Sarah, you have to understand. When you helped me pick out nursery furniture, you were planning to put your son in that room instead of my daughter. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? Jessica walked me through the master plan? Jessica looked toward the door as if considering escape, but Sarah's voice cut through her panic. The Four Seasons receipts are very detailed. Marcus paid for champagne and strawberries for your romantic pregnancy celebration. How touching. You need to understand something, Jessica said desperately. Marcus was already unhappy in your marriage long before I came into the picture. He felt trapped, suffocated by your dependence on him. Trapped enough to plan to take my baby and leave me with nothing. He loves you, Sarah, but he's in love with me. There's a difference between obligation and passion. Sarah laughed, a sound so bitter it made Jessica visibly flinch. He loves my trust fund access and the prenup that favors him if I'm proven mentally unfit. Very convenient that you're both in careers that require understanding legal loopholes. Jessica's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. It's not like that. Then explain to me exactly what it is like. Explain how my best friend and my husband decided to systematically destroy my life while pretending to care about my well-being. Jessica was quiet for a long moment, then looked up with defiance, replacing her earlier panic. You want the truth? Fine. Marcus hasn't been happy with you for years. You gave up your career and became this completely dependent housewife who has no interest beyond home decoration and pregnancy apps. He needs a partner who challenges him, not a project who needs constant management. Each word was designed to wound, targeting Sarah's deepest insecurities about losing her professional identity and becoming financially dependent on Marcus. And your pregnancy? Sarah asked, keeping her voice level despite the emotional assault. Jessica's hand moved protectively to her still flat stomach. Due in February, a son. Marcus is thrilled about having a boy to carry on his name. Sarah felt the room spin slightly. Jessica was 4 months pregnant with Marcus's son, while Sarah carried their daughter. Their children would be siblings, raised by the woman who'd systematically betrayed their mother. Does he know you're here right now, reporting back on my mental state? Jessica nodded miserably. He thought it would be good to assess how much you suspected after yesterday's incident. And now you get to go back and tell him that his plan worked perfectly, that I'm exactly as naive and trusting as you both believed. Sarah, tell him I believed every word you said about being concerned for my health. Tell him I'm looking forward to the baby shower you're planning, and that I'm so grateful to have such a devoted friend helping me through this difficult time." Jessica looked confused and wary. "But you just said you know everything." Sarah smiled, and for the first time since discovering the affair text, it was completely genuine. "I know everything you and Marcus have done to me, but you have no idea what I'm going to do to you." "What do you mean, you're going to leave now?" "Jessica, you're going to call Marcus and tell him your reconnaissance mission was successful, and then you're both going to continue with whatever timeline you've been following." "I don't understand." "You will," Sarah said, walking Jessica to the front door. "Give Marcus my love. Tell him I'm so grateful for his patience with my pregnancy hormones and confusion from the concussion." As Jessica's BMW pulled out of the circular driveway, Sarah watched from the window. Her former best friend was already on the phone, no doubt reporting back to Marcus about their conversation and Sarah's apparent continued ignorance. Let them think they'd won this round. Let them believe Sarah was still the naive pregnant wife who could be manipulated and discarded at will. Sarah picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she needed. Amanda, her sister, who'd built a successful law practice in San Francisco and had never liked Marcus from the beginning. "Amanda, it's Sarah. I know you're supposed to drive down today, but I need you to make a stop first. I need you to find me the best divorce attorney in California. And Amanda, don't tell anyone we're having this conversation." As Sarah hung up, she felt her daughter kick strongly, as if approving of her mother's newfound determination. The best friend mistress luxury affair scandals were about to become a very different story than Marcus and Jessica had planned. They'd underestimated the pregnant wife they thought they'd broken. But Sarah wasn't broken anymore. She was angry, informed, and ready to fight back with every resource at her disposal. The real battle was just beginning. Amanda Wright arrived at the mansion that evening with fire in her eyes and a briefcase full of legal documents. As a family law attorney who specialized in high-asset divorces, she'd seen enough cases of financial betrayal in marriages to recognize the signs immediately. "Show me everything," Amanda said, settling into the living room that overlooked the Pacific Ocean. Sarah handed over Marcus's iPad and watched her sister's expression grow progressively darker as she read through months of affair texts. Amanda had never trusted Marcus, calling him too polished and calculating during their engagement. But Sarah had dismissed her concerns as jealousy over Marcus's wealth. "This is systematic financial abuse disguised as marriage," Amanda said after an hour of reading. "Look at these messages about moving assets offshore and the timing of your pregnancy. They've been orchestrating this destruction for over a year." "Can they really take everything?" Sarah asked, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "That depends on several factors. Your prenup, what assets we can prove were acquired during the marriage, and whether we can demonstrate fraud. But Sarah, there's something else here that's deeply concerning. Look at this message thread about your therapy sessions." Amanda pointed to a series of texts where Marcus discussed Sarah's mental health concerns with Jessica, including specific details that should have been confidential between Sarah and Dr. Martinez. "Either your therapist is violating patient confidentiality in a major way, or Marcus has somehow gained access to your medical records," Amanda explained. "Both scenarios represent serious legal violations that we can use." Sarah felt physically sick. Dr. Martinez had been her anchor during the anxiety and depression that followed giving up her career. To discover that even that sacred space had been compromised felt like another layer of violation. "We need to move quickly," Amanda continued. "Tomorrow, I want you to meet with Victoria Chambers. She's the most feared high-asset divorce attorney on the West Coast, and she specializes in cases involving wealthy husband secrets and hidden financial manipulation." "But what about the prenup?" Marcus made sure it was comprehensive. "Prenups can be challenged if they were signed under duress or if there's evidence of fraud during the marriage. Marcus hiding affairs and systematically manipulating your mental health could invalidate significant portions of it." That night, while Marcus attended another business dinner that Sarah now knew was a romantic evening with Jessica, the sisters worked through the evidence methodically. Sarah had been documenting suspicious credit card charges, unexplained absences, and emotional manipulation tactics without even realizing it. Look at this pattern, Amanda said, spreading financial documents across the dining table. Every major purchase or asset transfer happens right after Marcus has been particularly cruel to you or made you doubt your capabilities. Sarah could see it clearly for the first time. The offshore account opened right after Marcus had convinced her she was too emotional to handle their household finances. The shell company created during her first trimester, when she'd been most vulnerable to morning sickness and fatigue. Even the house renovation that put everything solely in Marcus's name, completed while Sarah dealt with pregnancy complications. He's been systematically removing your access to marital assets while making you believe it was for your protection, Amanda explained. It's a classic pattern in cases of financial betrayal in marriages targeting pregnant women. The next morning, Sarah dressed carefully for her meeting with Victoria Chambers. She chose a navy Armani suit from her pre-pregnancy wardrobe, wanting to project strength and competence rather than vulnerable, expectant mother. Victoria Chambers' Beverly Hills office screamed power and intimidation. The attorney herself was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s who had built her reputation destroying wealthy men who thought they could manipulate the legal system to their advantage. "I've reviewed the materials Amanda sent over," Victoria said without preamble. "Your husband is in serious legal trouble, and not just for the affair." "What do you mean? The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the sudden asset transfers? This pattern suggests money laundering or sophisticated tax evasion. I have contacts at the IRS who would be extremely interested in Marcus's recent business practices." Sarah felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. "So we can fight this. We can do better than fight it. We can destroy him completely." Victoria's smile was predatory and reassuring at the same time. "But I need you to be prepared for what's coming. Marcus will try to paint you as an unstable pregnant woman having a breakdown. The media attention will be brutal. Your former friend will likely testify against you. I can handle it." "Can you?" "Because once we file these papers, there's no going back. Marcus will use every dirty trick he's learned to maintain control of his assets and reputation." Sarah thought about her unborn daughter, about the future Marcus and Jessica had planned that didn't include her except as a broken woman who'd lost everything. "I can handle it," Victoria nodded approvingly. "Then let's begin. First, we're going to freeze all joint accounts before Marcus can move more money. Second, we're going to get a restraining order based on the assault that caused your concussion. Third, we're going to subpoena his business records and see exactly how deep this financial fraud goes." Over the next week, Sarah watched her perfectly controlled world explode into magnificent chaos. Victoria's team moved with surgical precision, freezing accounts and filing motions that caught Marcus completely off guard. The look on his face when he came home to find legal papers scattered across his desk was almost worth the pain of everything he'd put her through. "Sarah, what the hell is this?" he demanded, storming into their bedroom where she was calmly packing her belongings. "It's called consequences. Marcus, you can't just freeze our accounts. You don't understand the complexity of our financial situation. I understand it perfectly now. I understand that you've been moving our money to accounts I can't access while planning to leave me with nothing but legal bills." Marcus's carefully maintained mask finally slipped completely. "You stupid, vindictive bitch. Do you have any idea what you've done? Those accounts fund my company operations. You're going to destroy everything we built together. We didn't build anything together. Marcus, you built an empire on lies while I played house and grew your heir. Judge Patterson will never side with a hysterical pregnant woman over a respected businessman. I have connections, reputation, political allies. You have a fair text planning to steal my child and offshore accounts that violate federal tax laws. Good luck explaining those to Judge Patterson." For the first time since she'd known him, Marcus looked genuinely afraid. The confident millionaire who'd swept her off her feet was suddenly just another wealthy man facing the consequences of his crimes. "Sarah, be reasonable. We can work this out privately. Settle everything without involving the courts. You don't want this to become a public spectacle. Actually, I think the public would be very interested in your business practices, especially the IRS." Marcus tried a different approach, sitting on the bed and attempting to take her hands. I made mistakes, but I love you. We can go to counseling, work through the affair. Think about our daughter. She needs both parents. Sarah pulled away from his touch with disgust. I am thinking about our daughter. I'm thinking about what kind of father plans to take custody away from her mother while betraying every vow he made. I'm thinking about what kind of man hits his pregnant wife and then uses her concussion to build a case for her mental instability. That was an accident. The head injury was an accident. The systematic emotional and financial abuse was completely intentional. Marcus stood up, his brief attempt at manipulation abandoned. You'll regret this. Sarah, I'll make sure you get nothing. I'll prove you're unfit to raise our child, and Jessica will be a better mother than you ever could be. Try it, Sarah said calmly. But remember, Marcus, I have 18 months of text messages where you and Jessica plan exactly how you're going to do it. Good luck explaining to a judge why that doesn't constitute premeditated fraud and conspiracy. After Marcus left, slamming doors and making furious phone calls to his legal team, Sarah sat in their bedroom and felt her daughter moving inside her. For the first time in months, the movement felt like celebration instead of anxiety. Her phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Victoria just called. Marcus's business partner contacted the FBI about suspicious financial transactions. This case is about to get much bigger than we expected. Sarah smiled as she finished packing her bags. Marcus had always underestimated women, treating them as emotional creatures who could be controlled through manipulation and financial dependence. He was about to learn just how dangerous that assumption could be when applied to a woman who discovered the truth and decided to fight back. As Sarah drove away from the mansion where she thought she would raise her daughter, she didn't look back. The millionaire husband cheating asset division nightmare was just beginning. But for the first time since discovering those affair texts, Sarah felt like she was the one in control of her destiny. Her phone rang as she reached Amanda's house in San Francisco. Jessica's name appeared on the screen. Sarah let it go to voicemail, then listened to the panicked message. Sarah, Marcus told me what you did. You need to stop this insanity before you ruin everything for all of us. Call me back immediately. Sarah deleted the message and blocked Jessica's number. Some betrayals were too deep for forgiveness, and some friendships were too poisoned by lies to ever salvage. But some women, when pushed too far by men who thought they owned them, became forces of nature that could destroy empires. Marcus and Jessica were about to discover which kind of woman they'd been foolish enough to cross. The heartbreaking family drama exploded across social media 3 days after Sarah filed for divorce. She was sitting in Amanda's guest room, trying to process the legal documents Victoria's team had filed, when her phone started buzzing incessantly with notifications. Jessica had posted a carefully crafted Instagram photo showing herself in Sarah's kitchen, arranging the flowers Marcus brought home each week. The caption read, "Sometimes friends going through difficult times need space to heal. Staying here to keep an eye on things while Sarah gets the professional help she needs. Praying for her mental health journey during this challenging pregnancy. Hashtag pregnancy is hard. Hashtag friends forever. Hashtag prayers needed." The post had garnered hundreds of comments within hours, most from their mutual friends expressing sympathy for Sarah's apparent breakdown and gratitude for Jessica's loyal friendship during such a difficult time. "That manipulative witch," Amanda said, reading over Sarah's shoulder. "She's controlling the entire narrative before you can tell your side of the story." Sarah scrolled through the responses with growing nausea. Friends she'd known for years were discussing her fragile mental state and pregnancy-related emotional instability as if she weren't capable of reading their analysis of her supposed breakdown. Caroline Martinez, a woman from their book club, had written, "I always worried about Sarah's anxiety levels. Remember how she quit her successful career so suddenly, Jessica? You're an angel for taking care of things during her crisis." Another friend, Rebecca Chen, added, "Pregnancy can really affect some women's cognitive abilities. Thank God she has Marcus and Jessica looking out for her well-being." The casual cruelty of it was staggering. Jessica had positioned herself as the devoted friend, sacrificing her own comfort to help during Sarah's mental health crisis, while simultaneously moving into Sarah's home and taking over her life. "We need to respond to this," Amanda said, but Sarah shook her head. "Not yet. Let her think she's winning." That afternoon brought devastating news from Victoria Chambers. "Marcus has filed a counter-petition claiming you're mentally unstable and unfit for custody," Victoria explained during an emergency phone conference. "He's using your current living situation with Amanda against you, claiming your family is manipulating you during a vulnerable time. Can he do that? He can try. He's also requesting immediate supervised visitation rights for after the baby's born, claiming he's concerned about your ability to care for the child safely." Sarah felt her world tilting dangerously. What about the restraining order? Still in place, but his lawyers are arguing it was filed during a mental health crisis and should be reconsidered. They're painting the entire legal action as the result of pregnancy-induced paranoia. That evening, as Sarah tried to eat dinner despite her churning stomach, Amanda's doorbell rang. Through the window, they could see a news van parked on the quiet residential street. "Mrs. Davidson." A reporter called through the door. "We'd like to get your side of the story about your separation from tech mogul Marcus Davidson." "How did they find me here?" Sarah asked. Amanda's expression was grim. "Someone gave them this address. Someone who knew exactly where you were staying." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You can't hide from the truth forever. People deserve to know what you're really like." Jessica wasn't just controlling the social media narrative. She was actively feeding information to reporters to keep Sarah on the defensive, while positioning herself as the reasonable voice in the situation. The next few days brought a cascade of stress-related health problems. Sarah developed gestational hypertension, requiring frequent doctor visits and bed rest. Each medical appointment became more ammunition for Marcus's case that she was too unstable to care for their child. "The irony is devastating," Dr. Martinez said during an emergency therapy session conducted via secure video call. "The stress they're creating is causing the exact symptoms they're using to prove you're unfit." "Dr. Martinez, I need to ask you something directly," Sarah said. "Have you shared any information about our sessions with anyone?" Dr. Martinez looked uncomfortable. "Sarah, I need to tell you something that I should have mentioned earlier. Marcus called my office several times expressing concern about your mental health. I assured him I couldn't discuss specifics, but what? He seemed to know details about our conversations that he shouldn't have known. Things you told me about feeling inadequate as a wife, worries about being a good mother, concerns about your changing body during pregnancy. He used my own therapy against me. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I started to suspect what was happening, but I should have addressed it directly with you sooner." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The baby was active, rolling and kicking as if sensing her mother's distress. Every time Sarah closed her eyes, she saw headlines about the pregnant wife betrayed by her tech millionaire husband, her private struggles broadcast for public consumption. At 3 a.m., she got up to use the bathroom and found Amanda in the kitchen, surrounded by legal documents and empty coffee cups. "Can't sleep either," Amanda asked. "Every time I think I understand how deep this goes, I discover another layer of betrayal," Sarah said, sitting down carefully. "He turned my own therapy into evidence against me." "Victoria's investigator found something interesting today," Amanda said, sliding a folder across the table. "Marcus has been seeing a private therapist too, but his sessions have been focused on strategies for high-conflict divorce cases. He's been preparing for this longer than we thought. Sarah, there's something else. The investigator traced some of the offshore accounts. They're not just hiding marital assets. They're connected to Marcus's business partner's money laundering operation." Sarah stared at her sister. "Money laundering. The FBI is already investigating Marcus's company. Our divorce case just became evidence in a federal criminal investigation. What does that mean for me and the baby? It means Marcus has much bigger problems than just losing half his assets in a divorce. If he's charged with federal crimes, his custody arguments become irrelevant." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a spark of genuine hope. So we wait for the federal case. We wait and we keep building our own evidence. But Sarah, you need to be prepared for this to get much worse before it gets better. Marcus is going to fight dirty, and he has Jessica helping him control the public narrative. The next morning proved Amanda right. Sarah woke to find her phone flooded with notifications from a video that had gone viral overnight. Jessica had posted security footage from inside the mansion, showing Sarah erratically packing her belongings and abandoning the family home. The video was edited to make Sarah's careful, methodical packing look frantic and unstable, with dramatic music and captions questioning her fitness as a mother. Pregnant wife abandons luxury home, mental health crisis, or gold digger exposed. Read the headline on a gossip blog that had picked up the story. The comments section was brutal. She looks completely unhinged in that video. Poor Marcus, trying to hold his family together while his wife has a complete breakdown. I feel sorry for that baby having such an unstable mother. Jessica is such a good friend for documenting this. Someone needs to protect that child. Sarah turned off her phone and walked to Amanda's bathroom, where she stared at herself in the mirror. Her face was pale and drawn, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She did look like someone having a breakdown, but as she stood there, her daughter kicked strongly, and Sarah felt something fundamental shift inside her. Let them think she was broken. Let them believe their narrative about the unstable pregnant wife having a mental health crisis. Because while they were busy destroying her reputation, Victoria's team was building a case that would destroy their lives. Sarah's phone rang from the bedroom. Victoria Chambers. Sarah, the FBI wants to interview you about Marcus's financial activities. They believe you may have been an unwitting victim of his money laundering operation. Tomorrow's in Sarah, they're very interested in those affair texts. Conspiracy to commit fraud is a federal crime. As Sarah hung up, she realized that the heartbreaking family drama playing out in public was about to become something much more significant. Marcus and Jessica had played their social media game perfectly, isolating her from friends and painting her as mentally unstable. But they'd forgotten one crucial detail. Sarah wasn't just a pregnant wife having a breakdown. She was a witness to federal crimes, and her testimony could put both of them in prison for decades. Let them have their temporary victory in the court of public opinion. Sarah was about to win the only battle that actually mattered. The FBI interview took place in a sterile conference room in downtown San Francisco. Agent Sarah Chen was a slight woman in her 40s who specialized in financial crimes, and her questions revealed depths to Marcus's criminal activities that made Sarah's affair discovery seem almost trivial by comparison. Mrs. Davidson, we need you to understand that your husband's business operations extend far beyond simple tax evasion, Agent Chen explained, spreading surveillance photographs across the table. We believe he's been laundering money for organized crime families using his tech company as a legitimate front. Sarah stared at photos of Marcus meeting with men she didn't recognize in expensive restaurants and private clubs. I had no idea any of this was happening. We believe that was intentional on his part. Your lack of knowledge about his business activities may have been a carefully calculated decision. Tell me about your access to financial information during your marriage. Marcus always said I wouldn't understand the technical aspects of his work. He handled all our major financial decisions and business relationships. Agent Chen exchanged meaningful glances with her partner. Agent Rodriguez. Mrs. Davidson, your husband has a very specific pattern of behavior when it comes to romantic relationships. You're not his first victim. Sarah felt the conference room temperature drop several degrees. What do you mean? Marcus has been married 3 times before you. Each marriage followed an identical pattern. Pursuit of successful, independent women, followed by systematic isolation and financial control, ending in the wife's death under suspicious circumstances. Sarah couldn't breathe. Death. His most recent wife before you, Elena Davidson, died in a car accident 3 years ago while they were going through a contentious divorce. She discovered his money laundering operation and was cooperating with our initial investigation. He told me she died of cancer. Elena was perfectly healthy when she died. The accident occurred on a mountain road in Malibu, the same road you drive regularly to reach your former home. Sarah's vision blurred as the implications hit her. You think he murdered her? We're reopening that investigation based on new evidence? But there's more. Mrs. Davidson, Elena wasn't his only wife to die under questionable circumstances. Agent Chen pulled out another file, this one thick with photographs and police reports. Marcus's first wife, Maria Santos, died of an apparent suicide 5 years before Elena. She'd filed for divorce after discovering evidence of Marcus's affairs and financial irregularities. Sarah felt like she was drowning. How many wives has he had? 4 total, including you. You're the first one still alive when the truth about his activities came to light. Agent Chen showed Sarah more surveillance photos, documenting a pattern that made her stomach turn. Each wife followed the same trajectory. Marcus would target successful, independent women with their own careers and financial resources. He'd charm them into marriage, convince them to give up their professional lives, then systematically destroy their mental health and self-confidence. And when they tried to leave, they died. Car accidents, suicides, mysterious illnesses that weren't detected until after death. Always during divorce proceedings. Always when they posed a threat to his business operations. Sarah's hand went protectively to her belly, where her daughter was moving restlessly as if sensing her mother's terror. What about Jessica? Does she know about the other wives? We believe Jessica Collins is a knowing and willing participant in Marcus's operation. She's not just his current mistress. She's his business partner in these elaborate schemes. Business partner. Agent Chen nodded grimly. Jessica has helped Marcus with at least 3 previous relationships. She specializes in befriending the wives, gathering intelligence about their daily routines and emotional vulnerabilities, then providing alibis for Marcus during their critical periods. Sarah felt physically sick. She's done this before. Jessica was Elena's best friend too, and Maria's maid of honor. She has a very specific skill set that Marcus finds valuable, the ability to gain complete trust from women while systematically betraying them. The agent showed Sarah more photographs, these showing Jessica with Elena and Maria in happier times. The same poses, the same intimate friendship, the same devastating betrayal repeated over and over. Mrs. Davidson, we need your help to build a case that will put both Marcus and Jessica in prison for the rest of their lives. But I have to warn you, they've killed to protect their secrets before, and they know you have access to information that could destroy them. What do you need me to do? For now, continue acting as if you don't know about the federal investigation. Let them think you're just an angry wife fighting for custody and financial settlement. Meanwhile, we'll be building our case using the evidence you've provided. How long before you can arrest them? Soon. We're very close to having enough evidence for federal charges. But Sarah, I need you to understand how dangerous your situation is. Marcus has killed 3 women to protect his operation. Don't underestimate what he's capable of. That evening, Sarah sat in Amanda's living room, trying to process the magnitude of what she'd learned. Her husband wasn't just a cheating millionaire. He was a serial killer who'd been planning her murder from the moment she became inconvenient to his operation. We need to get you somewhere completely safe, Amanda said after hearing about the FBI interview. Where can I go that he won't find me? He has unlimited resources and Jessica helping him track my movements. What about a federal safe house? Sarah shook her head. I'm not ready to disappear. I have a foundation to build, a story to tell, and women to protect. Sarah, this man has murdered 3 wives. This isn't about principles anymore. You're right. It's about justice. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. I think we should meet and discuss our situation like adults. There are things you don't understand about our financial arrangements. Can you meet me tomorrow evening? Instead of fear, Sarah felt a cold determination settle over her. Marcus thought she was still the naive wife he could manipulate with charm and veiled threats. He had no idea she knew about Elena, Maria, and his pattern of eliminating inconvenient spouses. I'm going to meet with him, Sarah announced. Absolutely not. Amanda, The FBI needs evidence of his current plans. If I can get him to reveal what he's planning for me, it could save my life and put him away forever. It's too dangerous. So is letting him think he can keep getting away with murder. So is allowing him to plan my accident while I hide and hope someone else will stop him. Sarah called Agent Chen and explained her proposal. The agent was initially resistant, but eventually agreed to provide surveillance and recording equipment. If you're determined to do this, we'll do it properly, Agent Chen said. You'll wear recording devices, and we'll have agents positioned around the meeting location. At the first sign of physical danger, we intervene immediately. The next day, Sarah drove to the neutral location she'd chosen, a busy restaurant in Beverly Hills where Marcus would feel safe but federal agents could maintain visual surveillance. She'd chosen a maternity dress that would conceal the recording equipment while making her appear vulnerable and non-threatening. Marcus was already seated when she arrived, looking every inch the successful tech entrepreneur in his expensive Italian suit. His smile was warm and genuine, the same expression that had convinced 3 other women to trust him with their lives. "You look radiant," he said, standing to kiss her cheek. "Pregnancy really does suit you beautifully. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Of course, I've been genuinely worried about you since this misunderstanding began. I think we can resolve everything if we just communicate honestly." Sarah studied his face, searching for any sign of the monster Agent Chen had described. But Marcus was performing perfectly, playing the role of concerned husband with the skill of a practiced sociopath. "I've been thinking about what you said regarding our financial arrangements," Sarah began carefully. "I realize I may have overreacted. I'm so relieved to hear that. I know I made some serious mistakes with Jessica, but that situation has been handled. My priority now is protecting you and our daughter." "What about the offshore accounts? Those are legitimate business protections." "Darling, the tech industry is volatile, and I've worked hard to ensure our family's security regardless of market fluctuations." The lie was delivered with such conviction that Sarah almost believed it despite everything she knew. "Marcus, can I ask you something about your previous wives?" Something flickered in his eyes. So briefly she almost missed it. "What about them? I've been having anxiety about my safety since the concussion. Probably irrational pregnancy fears. But I keep thinking about how young they were when they died." Both Elena and Maria struggled with mental health issues. "Sweetheart, I did everything I could to help them. But sometimes people make tragic choices. Elena's car accident was a devastating tragedy that I still blame myself for. If I'd recognized how unstable she was becoming during our divorce proceedings, I might have been able to prevent it." The casual rewriting of murder as suicide was chilling. Marcus was so comfortable with his lies that he probably believed them himself. "I worry sometimes about my own mental state," Sarah said. "This pregnancy has been so stressful, and with everything happening between us." Marcus reached across the table and took her hands. "You're going to be fine, darling. I would never let anything happen to you or our baby." The lie was delivered with such tender concern that Sarah felt a chill despite the warm restaurant atmosphere. "Marcus, if something did happen to me, would you make sure our daughter knows I loved her? Nothing is going to happen to you. But if you're worried about safety, you should be more careful about your driving. Those mountain roads can be treacherous, especially for pregnant women who might be emotionally distracted." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Marcus was already planning her accident, using the same method that had killed Elena. "That's very thoughtful advice," Sarah said. "I'll be extra careful." As Marcus walked her to her car, Sarah felt the weight of the recording devices hidden in her dress. Every word of their conversation had been captured by federal agents, including his casual threat about dangerous mountain roads. "Drive safely," Marcus said, kissing her forehead with apparent tenderness. "I'll call you tomorrow to continue our discussion about reconciliation." As Sarah drove away, she touched the recording device and smiled. Marcus had just confessed to murdering his previous wives, and the FBI had captured every word. For the first time since discovering the affair texts, Sarah felt genuinely safe. Not because Marcus wasn't planning to kill her, he absolutely was, but because now she had the evidence to stop him first. Her phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chen. "We have everything we need. Arrest will happen tomorrow morning. Stay somewhere secure tonight." The hidden secrets from Marcus's millionaire past were finally going to be exposed to the world, and this time, his intended victim would survive to see justice served. The federal raids began at dawn. Sarah watched the live news coverage from Amanda's living room as agents and FBI windbreakers swarmed Marcus's tech company headquarters and the Malibu mansion she'd once called home. The arrests were swift and coordinated. Marcus taken from his corner office. Jessica apprehended at her real estate firm while meeting with unsuspecting clients. "This is unprecedented," the news anchor reported breathlessly. "Federal agents have arrested tech mogul Marcus Davidson and real estate agent Jessica Collins in connection with a multi-million-dollar money laundering operation that may have involved the murders of multiple women." Sarah felt a profound sense of relief watching Marcus led away in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled and his carefully maintained image destroyed forever. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked powerless and afraid. Agent Chen called within an hour of the arrest. "Both suspects are in federal custody without bail. We found additional evidence during the raids that confirms everything we suspected about the previous wives." "What kind of evidence?" "Life insurance policies taken out on Elena and Maria shortly before their deaths, with Marcus as the sole beneficiary. Financial records showing he inherited their assets after systematically alienating them from their families. And in Jessica's apartment, we found what can only be described as trophies. Trophies. Jewelry belonging to the murdered wives, wedding rings, family heirlooms, personal items that should have gone to their families. Jessica kept them as souvenirs of their successful operations." Sarah felt physically sick. Jessica hadn't just helped murder these women. She'd collected mementos of their deaths like a serial killer, keeping tokens from victims. "There's more," Agent Chen continued. "We found detailed emails between Marcus and Jessica discussing your pregnancy timeline and the optimal moment to eliminate you. They were planning to wait until after your daughter was born to avoid complications with custody arrangements. They wanted my baby. The plan was for Jessica to step in as the grieving stepmother after your tragic accident. She'd already been establishing herself in your community as your closest friend and confidant, preparing for her role as the bereaved best friend who would help Marcus raise his orphaned daughter." Sarah finally understood why Jessica had been so aggressive about planning the baby shower, posting supportive messages on social media, and positioning herself as the loyal friend during Sarah's crisis. It was all preparation for stepping into Sarah's life completely after her murder. What happens now? Both suspects will remain in federal custody pending trial. The charges include conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, tax evasion, and racketeering. They're looking at life sentences without possibility of parole. Victoria Chambers arrived at Amanda's house that afternoon with updates on the civil litigation. "With Marcus in federal custody, we can expedite the divorce proceedings and asset recovery. The prenup is completely void since it was based on fraudulent financial representations." "What about his wealth?" "Most of it was never legally his to begin with. The mansions, luxury cars, business assets. They're all proceeds from criminal activities spanning over a decade. The federal government will seize everything as part of the money laundering prosecution." Sarah felt a strange combination of relief and disorientation. She was finally free from Marcus's control, but the lifestyle she'd known was built entirely on blood money from murdered women. "However," Victoria continued, "you're entitled to substantial victim compensation from the federal case, plus any legitimate assets Marcus acquired before his criminal activities escalated. It won't be mansion-level wealth, but it'll provide excellent financial security for you and your daughter. I don't want anything that came from his crimes. Fortunately, the FBI is confiscating most of those assets anyway. But Sarah, you're also looking at significant income opportunities from your story. Book deals, documentary rights, speaking engagements. Your survival and testimony are going to be worth millions in their own right." Over the next few weeks, the full scope of Marcus and Jessica's operation emerged through court filings and news reports. Marcus had been running his money laundering scheme for over a decade, using his marriages as elaborate cover stories for his criminal associations. Each wife had been selected for specific professional skills that made them useful to his operation. Elena had been a forensic accountant whose expertise he'd needed to structure complex financial transactions. Maria had been an immigration attorney whose practice gave him access to clients who needed money, moved internationally. Sarah had been chosen for her marketing background and her family's social connections in Silicon Valley. "He didn't marry any of you for love," Victoria explained during one of their meetings. "You were all human assets to be exploited and eliminated when you became liabilities to his operation." The revelation was devastating and liberating simultaneously. Sarah's entire marriage had been a business transaction based on her usefulness to Marcus's criminal enterprise. But it also meant that nothing about their relationship had been genuine enough to grieve. Jessica's role was even more calculating than Sarah had imagined. She'd specialized in befriending the wives, gathering detailed intelligence about their daily routines, emotional vulnerabilities, and family relationships. She'd helped Marcus systematically isolate each woman from their support systems before their murders. Jessica was essentially an undercover operative, Agent Chen explained during one of Sarah's witness preparation sessions. She'd spend months or even years building intimate friendships with each wife, reporting back on their mental state, their level of suspicion about Marcus's activities, and the optimal timing for elimination. How did I miss the signs for so long? Because she's a master manipulator who spent years perfecting her techniques. She made each wife feel like they were her closest confidant while she was systematically gathering information to destroy them. The media attention was overwhelming but manageable with Victoria's guidance. Sarah's story became international news, with outlets calling it the most shocking betrayal and survival story of the decade. She received thousands of messages from women sharing their own experiences with financial manipulation and emotional abuse. "You've become more than a survivor," Amanda observed, reading through the supportive emails flooding Sarah's inbox. "You're a symbol of hope for women who thought they were trapped in impossible situations." But the emotional victory felt incomplete when Sarah considered the cost. 3 women had died because no one had believed their concerns about Marcus's behavior. Sarah had survived only because federal investigators happened to be monitoring his business activities when she discovered the affair. The trial preparation was intensive and emotionally draining. Sarah had to relive every moment of Marcus's manipulation, from their initial courtship to his final veiled threats about dangerous driving conditions. The prosecution needed her testimony to establish the behavioral patterns that connected Elena and Maria's deaths to Marcus's current criminal activities. "Your testimony is absolutely crucial," Prosecutor James Mitchell explained during one of their preparation sessions. "Marcus's defense team will argue that the previous deaths were coincidental, that he simply had bad luck with unstable wives. We need you to demonstrate for the jury how he systematically destroys his wives' mental health and independence before murdering them." "What if I'm not strong enough?" "Sarah, you survived a sociopathic serial killer who'd successfully murdered 3 previous wives. You gathered evidence, cooperated with federal investigators, and helped expose a criminal organization that had been operating for over a decade. You're stronger than you realize." As Sarah's due date approached, the stress of the investigation and trial preparation began affecting her pregnancy. She developed complications that required hospitalization, and for several terrifying days, doctors worried about both her and her baby's survival. "The psychological trauma of everything you've endured is manifesting physically," her doctor explained. "We may need to consider early delivery if your condition doesn't stabilize." Sarah looked at the monitors tracking her daughter's heartbeat and made a decision that would define the rest of their lives together. "I want to testify before the baby comes," she told Victoria. "I want Marcus to see that he didn't succeed in breaking me. Sarah, your health. My daughter deserves to be born into a world where her father is in prison for his crimes, not planning more murders from a jail cell awaiting trial." The trial date was expedited to accommodate Sarah's medical situation. As she prepared to face Marcus in court for the first time since his arrest, She realized that the wealth loss in infidelity had actually given her something far more valuable than any mansion or bank account. It had given her back her life, her strength, and her determination to protect other women from predators like Marcus and Jessica. The master manipulation had failed because Marcus had fundamentally misunderstood the woman he'd tried to destroy. He'd seen her as a weak, dependent victim who would break under pressure. Instead, she'd become the witness who would ensure he never hurt anyone again. Dr. Elena Martinez had evolved from therapist to lifeline during Sarah's transformation from victim to survivor. Their sessions, now held in a secure location due to ongoing federal security concerns, focused on rebuilding Sarah's psychological foundation after years of systematic manipulation. Sarah, I want you to understand something fundamental about what Marcus did to you. Dr. Martinez explained during one of their intensive sessions, what you experienced is called coercive control, and it's one of the most sophisticated forms of psychological abuse. I feel so foolish for not recognizing it sooner. That's exactly the response Marcus was cultivating. Coercive control works by gradually undermining your confidence and decision-making abilities until you become completely dependent on your abuser's interpretation of reality. Through therapy, Sarah began mapping the subtle ways Marcus had isolated her from her former life. He'd convinced her to leave her successful marketing career by creating constant emergencies that required her presence at home. He'd systematically criticized her friendships until she'd withdrawn from most social connections. He'd even controlled her medical care by choosing her doctors and somehow accessing her therapy notes. The pregnancy was the perfect psychological trap, Dr. Martinez observed. Marcus knew that expectant mothers are naturally more protective and risk-averse, making them easier to control through manufactured crises and emotional manipulation. How do I ensure this never happens again? By learning to trust your own instincts and judgment again. Marcus spent years convincing you that you were too emotional, too naive, and too dependent to make important decisions. Reclaiming your sense of self-worth is essential for your long-term empowerment. Sarah had been working through what Dr. Martinez called identity reconstruction, remembering who she'd been before Marcus's influence began reshaping her personality. The successful marketing executive who'd built her own client base, traveled internationally for work, and made complex strategic decisions had been gradually replaced by a woman who second-guessed her every choice. I gave up everything that made me who I was, Sarah said during one particularly emotional session. My career, my financial independence, my sense of competence. I became exactly what he wanted, a decorative asset with no real power. But you found your power again when survival required it. You gathered evidence, worked with federal investigators, and exposed a criminal organization. That takes extraordinary courage and intelligence. I don't feel courageous. Most days I feel completely overwhelmed. Feeling overwhelmed after surviving systematic psychological abuse is completely normal. But Sarah, consider what you've accomplished while feeling overwhelmed. You've helped solve multiple murders, exposed federal crimes, and protected countless future victims. That's not the behavior of a powerless woman. The therapeutic work became the foundation for Sarah's broader journey of self-discovery. She began reading the books that had sustained other women through similar transformations. Untamed by Glennon Doyle, Educated by Tara Westover, Wild by Cheryl Strayed, stories of women who'd escaped control and rebuilt their lives on their own terms. I want to return to marketing, Sarah announced during one session. Not because I need the income, but because I need to remember what it feels like to use my professional skills again. What kind of marketing work interests you now? Something completely different from my previous corporate clients. I keep thinking about all the women who've contacted me since the story broke. Women trapped in similar situations who don't know how to escape safely. The idea had been developing throughout Sarah's recovery process. She'd received thousands of messages from women sharing their own experiences with financial manipulation, emotional abuse, and systematic control. Many felt completely trapped by their circumstances, lacking the resources or knowledge to leave safely. I want to create a comprehensive resource organization, Sarah explained. Something that addresses not just the emotional aspects of abuse, but the practical barriers, financial dependence, legal complications, childcare concerns, housing insecurity, that would transform your trauma into a powerful tool for helping others. Working on the organizational proposal became Sarah's therapy between formal sessions. She researched existing domestic violence resources, identified gaps in services, and began developing programs specifically designed for women escaping financially complex abusive relationships. The work was emotionally challenging, but profoundly healing. Each time Sarah wrote about recognizing manipulation tactics or building financial independence, she was reinforcing her own recovery while creating tools that could save other lives. I want to call it the Elena and Maria Foundation, Sarah told Amanda during one of their planning sessions. Marcus's previous wives deserve better than being forgotten as statistics. Their names should be associated with helping other women escape. That's a beautiful way to honor their memory while building something meaningful from this nightmare. The foundation work connected Sarah with other survivors of sophisticated abuse tactics. Women who'd lost their children, their homes, their entire identities to partners who specialized in psychological manipulation. But also women who'd successfully escaped and rebuilt their lives stronger than before. Your story gives us validation, one survivor told Sarah during a support group meeting. When someone with your education and resources can be systematically deceived, it helps people understand that this isn't about intelligence or weakness. It's about predators who perfect psychological warfare techniques. Sarah's public speaking began organically through support groups, but gradually expanded to larger audiences. She discovered that she had a natural ability to explain the mechanisms of coercive control in ways that helped both victims and their support systems understand what was happening. Financial abuse is often the final lock on the prison, Sarah would explain during her presentations. By the time you realize you have no access to money, no career to return to, and no financial independence, escape seems impossible. The speaking engagements were empowering but also exhausting. As her pregnancy progressed, Sarah struggled with fatigue and the emotional toll of constantly revisiting her trauma to help other women. I worry that I'm using advocacy work to avoid processing my own healing, Sarah admitted to Dr. Martinez. It's common for trauma survivors to channel their recovery energy into helping others as a way of feeling powerful again. But you need to balance external work with internal healing. And how do I maintain both? By remembering that your personal recovery and your advocacy work can reinforce each other. Helping other women helps you process your own experience. But you also need private time to grieve what you lost and celebrate your survival. Sarah began incorporating more personal healing activities into her routine. She took prenatal yoga classes where the focus on breathing and mindfulness helped manage her ongoing anxiety. She started journaling regularly, documenting not just her trauma, but also her growing sense of empowerment and purpose. Most importantly, she began planning for her daughter's arrival not as a woman abandoned by her criminal husband, but as a strong individual choosing to raise her child in an environment free from manipulation and control. I want my daughter to grow up seeing female empowerment as completely normal, Sarah told Dr. Martinez during one of their final sessions before the trial. I want her to understand that women can be independent, successful, and strong without needing anyone's permission or approval. She'll have an extraordinary example in her mother. As Sarah prepared for the testimony that would hopefully put Marcus away forever, she realized that her journey of self-discovery was really just beginning. The woman who'd been betrayed by her millionaire husband and manipulative best friend was gone forever. The woman who'd survived, fought back, and was building something meaningful from the destruction was someone entirely new. Someone Marcus never could have controlled because he never could have imagined she existed. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Prosecutor Mitchell. Final trial preparation tomorrow at 9 a.m. Are you ready? Sarah looked at her reflection in Amanda's bathroom mirror, seeing not the broken pregnant wife Marcus had tried to create, but a survivor preparing to give voice to murdered women and protect countless others. Ready, she replied. The female empowerment through therapy and self-discovery had prepared her for this moment, not just to survive Marcus's final manipulation attempts, but to emerge stronger than she'd ever been before. The federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles was surrounded by media trucks and protesters as Sarah prepared to testify in what had become the most closely watched criminal trial of the year. The luxury divorce due to mistress had transformed into something far more significant, a federal prosecution that would expose an entire network of criminal activity spanning over a decade. Sarah sat in the witness preparation room, her hands resting on her 8-month pregnant belly, watching muted news coverage of the proceedings. The headlines called it the tech mogul murder trial and Silicon Valley's deadliest secrets exposed. This testimony will be the centerpiece of our case, prosecutor James Mitchell explained, reviewing Sarah's notes one final time. The defense is going to paint Marcus as a successful businessman wrongly accused by a vindictive ex-wife. We need the jury to understand the systematic nature of his crimes. What about Jessica's testimony? She's been cooperating fully since her arrest. Faced with evidence of her trophy collection and her role in planning multiple murders, she accepted a plea bargain in exchange for testifying against Marcus. Victoria Chambers squeezed Sarah's hand reassuringly. Remember, you have the truth on your side. Marcus's lawyers will try to intimidate you, but they can't change the evidence. Walking into the courtroom felt surreal. Sarah hadn't seen Marcus since their recorded dinner conversation months ago, and the man sitting at the defense table bore little resemblance to the charming millionaire who'd once swept her off her feet. Federal custody had aged him dramatically, and his expensive suits had been replaced with standard courtroom attire. Marcus's eyes found Sarah's as she approached the witness stand, and she saw a flash of the rage that had led to her concussion. But she also saw something new, genuine fear. The man who'd controlled and manipulated women for years was terrified of the pregnant wife he'd underestimated. Please state your name for the record, Prosecutor Mitchell began. Sarah Elizabeth Davidson. And what is your relationship to the defendant? Marcus Davidson. He is my estranged husband and the father of my unborn child. The questioning began methodically, establishing Sarah's background and the timeline of her marriage to Marcus. She described their seemingly perfect life, the Malibu mansion, the luxury lifestyle, the gradual isolation from her career and independence. Mrs. Davidson, when did you first become aware of your husband's affair with Jessica Collins? When I discovered text messages on his iPad after he gave me a concussion by striking me in the head. Can you describe the circumstances that led to that injury? Sarah took a deep breath and recounted the morning Marcus had hit her in his drunken rage. She watched several jurors wince as she described waking up hours later to find messages between Marcus and Jessica planning her systematic destruction. What was your emotional state when you discovered these messages? Initially devastated and confused, but as I read more, I realized they weren't just planning an affair. They were planning to take my baby, destroy my reputation, and eliminate me as an obstacle to their operation. The prosecution introduced the affair text as evidence, reading selected messages that revealed the scope of Marcus and Jessica's conspiracy. The jury listened with visible horror as the plan to manipulate Sarah's medical records, isolate her from support systems, and stage her accidental death was detailed in clinical language. Mrs. Davidson, during your marriage, did your husband ever discuss his previous wives? He told me Elena died of cancer and Maria committed suicide due to mental health problems. He said he'd been very unlucky in love before meeting me. What did you later learn about the actual circumstances of these deaths? That they were both murdered to prevent them from exposing Marcus's criminal activities and testifying against his money laundering operation. The defense attorney objected repeatedly, trying to prevent Sarah from discussing the previous murders. But Judge Harrison allowed the testimony to establish the pattern of behavior central to the prosecution's case. The cross-examination was brutal, but expected. Defense attorney Richard Kane attempted to portray Sarah as an unstable woman, seeking revenge through false accusations. Mrs. Davidson, isn't it true that you were prescribed psychiatric medication during your pregnancy? Yes, After discovering that my husband had murdered his previous wives and was planning to kill me, I experienced anxiety that required medical treatment. And isn't it true that you consulted with multiple attorneys about maximizing your financial settlement in divorce proceedings? I consulted with attorneys about protecting myself and my unborn child from a man who had systematically murdered his previous wives for financial gain. Cain pressed harder, attempting to make Sarah's reactions seem irrational or vindictive. But months of therapy and preparation had strengthened her resolve, and she answered each question with calm precision. Mrs. Davidson, you stand to profit substantially from book deals, movie rights, and media appearances related to your accusations against my client. Don't you? I stand to help other women recognize the warning signs of systematic abuse and escape before they're murdered. If sharing my survival story happens to be financially beneficial, I'll use those resources to fund programs for women in similar situations. The prosecution's redirect focused on the overwhelming evidence supporting Sarah's testimony, phone records placing Marcus at locations inconsistent with his alibis, financial documents proving he'd profited from each wife's death, security footage contradicting his claims about business meetings, and most damning, the recorded conversation where he'd threatened Sarah with the same fate as Elena. Mrs. Davidson, when the defendant suggested you should be careful driving on mountain roads, what did you understand him to mean? That he was planning to murder me using the same method he'd used to kill Elena Davidson? And how did that threat make you feel? Terrified for my daughter's life and absolutely determined to ensure he couldn't hurt anyone else. When Sarah stepped down from the witness stand after 2 days of testimony, she felt Elena and Maria's presence with her. Their stories had finally been told by someone who'd survived to bear witness to the truth. The trial continued for 6 more weeks, with testimony from FBI agents, financial forensics experts, and Elena's sister, who described the gradual changes in Elena's behavior before her death. The same pattern of isolation and psychological manipulation that Sarah had experienced. Jessica's testimony was devastating to the defense. Faced with her trophy collection and detailed evidence of her role in planning multiple murders, she'd cooperated fully with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence. Marcus told me that wives were temporary business assets, Jessica testified from the witness stand. He said the key was extracting maximum value from them financially and operationally before disposal became necessary. And you assisted him with this extraction process. I specialized in infiltrating their social circles, gathering intelligence about their daily routines and psychological vulnerabilities, and helping Marcus systematically undermine their confidence and support systems. Did you feel any remorse for these women? Jessica's answer sent chills through the courtroom. They were obstacles to our business success. I felt the same remorse I would feel about removing any other impediment to profit. Carnawana. The jury deliberated for 8 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Marcus Davidson was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, racketeering, and federal tax evasion charges. As Judge Harrison read the sentence, life in prison without possibility of parole, Sarah felt her daughter kick forcefully, as if celebrating her father's permanent removal from their lives. Outside the courthouse, Sarah faced hundreds of reporters and supporters, women who'd followed her story throughout the trial. Domestic violence advocates and survivors of similar abuse surrounded her with signs reading "Justice for Elena and Maria" and "Sarah's courage saves lives." Mrs. Davidson, how does it feel knowing your husband will never be able to hurt another woman? Sarah considered the question carefully before responding. It feels like Elena and Maria can finally rest in peace, and like my daughter will grow up in a world where her father can't manipulate or harm her. What's your message to other women who might be in similar situations? Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong in your relationship, investigate further. Don't let anyone convince you that your concerns are just paranoia or hormones. And remember that no amount of wealth or luxury is worth your life or your children's safety. As Sarah walked away from the courthouse with Amanda and Victoria, she realized that the luxury divorce due to mistress had become something far more significant than anyone had initially understood. It had exposed a criminal network, brought justice for murdered women, and created legal precedents that would help prosecutors in similar cases. Marcus Davidson's empire of manipulation and murder was finished forever. But Sarah's work as a survivor and advocate was just beginning. 6 weeks after Marcus's conviction, Sarah went into labor during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Amanda held her hand while Dr. Williams guided baby Hope Elizabeth Davidson into the world, named for the emotion that had sustained Sarah through her darkest moments. "She's absolutely perfect," Amanda whispered through tears as the nurse placed the baby in Sarah's arms. Sarah looked down at her daughter's serene face and felt a profound shift in her understanding of strength and purpose. This tiny person represented not just new life, but a future built on truth rather than manipulation, love rather than control. "Hello, sweet girl," Sarah murmured. "You're completely safe now. We both are." The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, feeding schedules, and the overwhelming love that came with first-time motherhood. Sarah had purchased a modest craftsman-style house in Pasadena, using funds from the Victim Compensation Program and her book advance. The home was a dramatic contrast to the Malibu mansion, smaller, cozier, and entirely her own. "You seem genuinely happy," Dr. Martinez observed during one of their ongoing sessions. "Not just relieved or recovering, but actually happy." "I feel authentic for the first time in years," Sarah replied, gently rocking Hope as the baby dozed peacefully. "Everything in my life now is real, my emotions, my choices, my relationships. Nothing is performed or calculated." The Elena and Maria Foundation had officially launched 8 months after the trial, with substantial funding from Sarah's victim compensation, book royalties, and speaking fees. The organization provided emergency financial assistance, legal resources, and comprehensive support for women escaping sophisticated abuse situations. "We've assisted 43 women in escaping dangerous relationships during our first year," Sarah reported to the Foundation's board during their annual meeting. "More importantly, we've reached thousands more through our educational programs about recognizing coercive control and financial manipulation." Sarah's advocacy work had evolved from survival testimony to educational leadership. She traveled nationwide teaching women, law enforcement professionals, and legal experts about the subtle warning signs of systematic abuse that often preceded physical violence or murder. "Financial abuse is the invisible prison that keeps women trapped," Sarah would explain during her presentations. "By the time you realize you have no access to money, no credit history, and no career to return to, escape seems impossible. That's why early education about these tactics is crucial." The speaking engagements were professionally fulfilling but emotionally demanding. Each presentation meant reliving aspects of her trauma to help other women recognize similar patterns in their own relationships. But the most meaningful moments came during private conversations with individual survivors. Women who contacted the foundation after recognizing themselves in Sarah's story, desperate for someone who understood their experience firsthand. "I thought I was losing my mind," one woman confided during a support group session. "My husband convinced me that my memory was unreliable, that I was too emotional to understand our finances, that I needed him to make all major decisions for our family." "That's textbook coercive control," Sarah replied gently. "The objective is to make you doubt your own perceptions so completely that you become dependent on your abuser's version of reality." "How did you find the courage to fight back?" Sarah considered the question while watching Hope sleep peacefully in her carrier. "I realized that my daughter deserved better than a mother who accepted being systematically destroyed. That gave me access to strength I didn't know existed." As Hope's first birthday approached, Sarah reflected on the year that had transformed her from victim to survivor to advocate. The moral lessons on resilience hadn't come from self-help books or therapy sessions alone, but from the daily choice to rebuild rather than retreat. Resilience isn't about being strong enough to prevent trauma from happening. Sarah told an audience of college students during a campus safety presentation, "It's about finding ways to grow and help others even after terrible things have already occurred." The question and answer sessions always brought challenging inquiries. Students wanted practical advice about recognizing manipulation in their own relationships, supporting friends in abusive situations, and rebuilding trust after betrayal. The most difficult part for me was accepting that everything I'd believed about my marriage was completely fabricated, Sarah explained to one young woman. But once I stopped trying to salvage something that had never been genuine, I could focus on building something authentic. Sarah's personal life remained deliberately quiet. Dating felt impossible while she focused on raising hope and building the foundation. She wasn't ready to trust her judgment about romantic relationships, and single motherhood felt like sufficient challenge for the present. Are you concerned you'll never be able to trust someone romantically again? A journalist asked during a magazine interview. I'm more concerned about trusting too quickly again, Sarah replied honestly. But I've learned to trust myself completely, which feels more important right now. The financial settlement from Marcus's criminal case had provided enough security for Sarah to purchase her house outright and establish a modest education fund for Hope. It wasn't the mansion-level luxury she'd once known, but it was honest money that couldn't be manipulated or seized through legal maneuvering. I'm actually happier with less material wealth, Sarah told Amanda during one of their weekly dinners. When everything you have depends on someone else's approval or continued goodwill, you never truly own any of it. Hope was walking now, toddling around the living room while Sarah worked on foundation business from her laptop. The baby had inherited Marcus's dark hair, but Sarah's expressive eyes. And sometimes Sarah caught glimpses of her own determined personality in her daughter's persistent exploration of their environment. She's going to be incredibly strong, Amanda observed, watching Hope repeatedly attempt to stack blocks despite constant failures. She has your tenacity, and she'll never depend on anyone else to define her worth, Sarah added firmly. That's the most important lesson I can teach her. Sarah's memoir, Breaking the Golden Cage, Surviving a Millionaire's Deadly Control, had become a bestseller and was being developed into a limited television series. Sarah had insisted on maintaining creative control to ensure the adaptation focused on empowerment rather than victimization. We want viewers to see your journey as heroic rather than pitiful, the executive producer explained during a script conference. Your story demonstrates that any woman can find the strength to fight back if she has proper resources and support. That's exactly the message I want to convey. Sarah agreed. No woman should have to face systematic abuse alone. As Sarah put Hope to bed that evening, she whispered the same promise she'd made every night since bringing her daughter home. You are safe, you are loved, and you will never be anyone's possession or project. Looking around the nursery, painted cheerful yellow with carefully chosen secondhand furniture and gifts from supportive friends, Sarah felt a contentment that had never existed in her former marble mansion. This represented genuine happiness, authentic, earned, and built on truth rather than illusion. Her phone buzzed with a message from a woman in Oregon. Sarah, I read your book and recognized my own situation completely. I'm leaving tomorrow with my children. Thank you for showing me it's possible to survive and thrive. Sarah smiled as she prepared for bed. Elena and Maria would never know how many lives their stories had saved through Sarah's survival and testimony. But their spirits could rest knowing that their deaths had meaning beyond Marcus's criminal ambitions. The new beginning wasn't about recreating a perfect life. It was about building a real one, with all its challenges and imperfections, grounded in truth and purpose rather than manipulation and control. Sarah had learned that genuine resilience wasn't about returning to who you were before trauma occurred. It was about becoming someone stronger and more authentic because of what you'd survived and overcome. As she answered emails from women seeking help and guidance, Sarah realized she'd never felt more powerful than she did in this moment. Single mother, survivor, advocate, and living proof that it was possible to transform devastating betrayal into unshakable strength. 2.5 years had passed since Marcus's life sentence, and Sarah's world had settled into what felt like permanent stability. Hope was a bright, talkative toddler who followed her mother around their Pasadena house, chattering constantly in the mix of English and Spanish she'd learned from their wonderful nanny, Rosa. Sarah was reviewing grant applications for the Elena and Maria Foundation's expansion into 3 new states when her phone rang. Victoria Chambers' name on the caller ID immediately triggered anxiety. Their professional relationship had ended with a successful conclusion of all legal proceedings. "Sarah, I have news that you need to hear immediately," Victoria said without her usual pleasantries. "Marcus has been granted a new trial." The coffee mug slipped from Sarah's hands, shattering against the hardwood floor in slow motion. "What do you mean?" "New trial." His appellate attorney successfully argued procedural errors in the original prosecution, technical issues with evidence admissibility, jury instruction problems, and constitutional violations during the investigation. The conviction has been completely overturned. The room seemed to spin as Sarah watched Hope playing innocently with her building blocks, unaware that the monster who'd tried to murder her mother had just been given another chance at freedom. How is that even possible? The evidence was overwhelming. The evidence remained solid, but the defense team successfully demonstrated that Marcus's constitutional rights were violated during the FBI investigation. It's a technicality, but it's legally sufficient to warrant a complete retrial. When does this happen? The new trial is scheduled to begin in 8 months. But Sarah, there's more disturbing news. Marcus posted bail this morning and has been released pending the retrial. Sarah felt her blood turn to ice water. He's out of prison. He's officially under house arrest with electronic monitoring and strict conditions. But Sarah, you need to implement security measures immediately. Men like Marcus don't forget who destroyed their carefully constructed lives. After ending the call, Sarah sat in her kitchen trying to process information that seemed impossible. Marcus Davidson, the man who'd murdered 3 wives and planned her elimination, was free again. The justice that had felt so final and permanent was suddenly provisional and temporary. She immediately called Amanda, who was in court but took the emergency call anyway. "I'm requesting a continuance and driving down tonight," Amanda said. "We need to discuss security protocols, legal options, and worst-case scenario planning. What if he tries to claim parental rights? What if he attempts to get custody of Hope now that his conviction is overturned? He can't. The family court's custody determinations were separate from the criminal proceedings. But Sarah, we need to be extremely careful. Very careful." That evening, as Sarah tucked Hope into her crib in the nursery they decorated together, she found herself obsessively checking window locks and security system controls with the same paranoia she'd felt during Marcus's original trial. The sense of safety and permanence she'd built over 2 years crumbled with a single phone call. "Mama worried?" Hope asked, her dark eyes, so unfortunately reminiscent of Marcus's, looking up with innocent concern. "Mama's just tired, sweetheart," Sarah lied, stroking her daughter's silky hair. "Everything is perfectly fine." But everything wasn't fine. The sanctuary Sarah had created for herself and Hope was suddenly under threat again from the same predator who'd nearly destroyed them before. Amanda arrived with a security consultant who immediately began installing additional cameras, motion sensors, and reinforced door systems. They discussed safe rooms, escape routes, and emergency protocols for different threat levels. "I hate that we're going through this nightmare again," Sarah said, watching the security expert test perimeter alarms. "Marcus spent 2.5 years in federal prison with nothing to do but plan his revenge and study legal strategies." Amanda replied grimly, "We have to assume he's been preparing for this opportunity since the day he was sentenced." The next morning brought news that confirmed their worst fears. Marcus had assembled a new legal team and launched an aggressive media campaign to rehabilitate his public image. He was claiming that he'd been the victim of prosecutorial misconduct and a vindictive ex-wife's false accusations. "Innocent businessman fights to clear, name after wrongful conviction," read the headline in a major business publication that had apparently accepted Marcus's revisionist narrative without critical analysis. The article portrayed Sarah as an emotionally unstable woman who'd manipulated federal investigators during a bitter divorce proceeding. It suggested that evidence against Marcus had been fabricated or misinterpreted by agents eager to secure a high-profile conviction. "He's systematically rewriting history," Sarah told Dr. Martinez during an emergency therapy session, making himself the victim and me, the manipulative villain who destroyed an innocent man's life. This is classic narcissistic manipulation tactics. Sarah, Marcus is using his resources and charm to control public narrative, exactly like he did during your marriage. But people will believe him. He's charismatic, wealthy, and understands how to manipulate media coverage to his advantage. Some people will believe his version, others will remember the evidence, the testimony from multiple victims, and the original conviction. You can't control everyone's perceptions, but you can control your response. Sarah's foundation work became more crucial than ever. If Marcus was going to wage a public relations war to discredit her credibility, she needed to remind people why his conviction had been necessary and justified. She scheduled interviews with major news programs, participated in documentary projects about systematic abuse, and spoke at domestic violence conferences nationwide. Every appearance served as both a defense of her integrity and an education about the tactics predators like Marcus use to destroy their victims. The most dangerous period for women in abusive relationships is when they attempt to leave or seek justice, Sarah explained during a CNN interview. Marcus Davidson's behavior pattern demonstrates exactly why this is true. When women become inconvenient or threatening to his control, he systematically eliminates them. But Marcus's resources were substantial, and his new strategy was sophisticated. He'd hired the most expensive public relations firm available, and they were methodically discrediting every aspect of Sarah's testimony. They questioned timeline details, suggested alternative explanations for evidence, and painted the original federal investigation as a politically motivated witch hunt. 4 months before the retrial was scheduled to begin, Sarah received a letter that made her blood freeze. It had been delivered despite Marcus's house arrest conditions and the restraining orders that should have prevented any contact. "My dearest Sarah," it read in his familiar, elegant handwriting, "I've had considerable time to reflect on our misunderstanding, and I realize now that I didn't properly appreciate what a remarkable and resourceful woman you are. I hope we can find a path forward that serves Hope's best interests. After all, our daughter needs both her parents in her life. I'll be in touch soon about arranging appropriate visitation. All my love, Marcus." The casual threat was unmistakable and terrifying. Marcus was positioning himself to claim parental rights and access to Hope, using the legal system as his weapon of choice. Sarah immediately contacted Victoria and law enforcement, but their response was frustratingly limited. Marcus hadn't technically violated his bail conditions or the existing restraining order. The letter was carefully crafted to avoid explicit threats while making his intentions absolutely clear. "He's executing a long-term strategy," Victoria explained during an emergency consultation. "Marcus understands he might lose the retrial, so he's positioning himself to claim parental rights regardless of the criminal case outcome. Is that legally possible? If his conviction is overturned permanently and he's acquitted in the retrial, his parental rights would be automatically restored? A family court judge might be legally required to grant supervised visitation at minimum." Sarah felt physically sick. The idea of Marcus having any access to Hope was unthinkable, but the legal system that had once protected them was now potentially working in his favor. That night, as Sarah performed her usual security check and kissed Hope goodnight, she made a decision that would have seemed impossible 3 years earlier. If the legal system couldn't protect her daughter from a man who'd murdered 3 women, Sarah would find alternative solutions. She began researching international custody law, domestic violence safe houses, and countries without extradition treaties with the United States. If Marcus wanted to play legal games with Hope's safety, Sarah was prepared to disappear entirely rather than risk her daughter's life. The naive woman who'd once trusted a charming millionaire was permanently gone. In her place was a mother who would do whatever necessary to protect her child, even if it meant spending the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know where you live now. I know Hope's daycare schedule. I know your daily routines and security measures. See you very soon. M." As Sarah stared at the message, she realized that the perfect new life she'd built was about to be shattered again. But this time, she wasn't the same woman Marcus had once controlled and manipulated. This time, Sarah was ready for war. The sequel to her nightmare was beginning. But Sarah had learned something crucial from surviving the first round. Sometimes the only way to defeat a monster is to become more dangerous and determined than he is. Hope deserved better than a life spent running from her father's evil intentions. She deserved a world where Marcus Davidson could never hurt anyone again. And Sarah was going to ensure she got exactly that, regardless of what it might cost. The story of the pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband was far from finished. But the ending was going to be very different than Marcus expected. Because this time, Sarah wasn't just fighting for her own survival. She was fighting for every woman who'd ever been told she was too emotional, too unstable, or too weak to trust her own instincts about danger. And women like that, when they finally stopped being afraid and started being angry, were the most formidable enemies a predator like Marcus could possibly face. The real battle was about to begin, and this time Sarah intended to win permanently.